2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm a host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field, or simply send emails in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, whether it's LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, if it's 12, 13, or 14, and which operating system that you're running, that information is often helpful. You should have, and if you ask your question and you don't see an immediate response, we will probably, as we go through the questions, we'll go through it in chronological order. So if you don't see an immediate response, we will get to the questions. We may sometimes be 30 minutes behind, depending on the questions. So with that, if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We should have a index of all topics covered in the live stream today, pinned to the top of the comments field. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been in previous live streams, you can go to Cubase Index at cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. We have two people that serve as moderators. We have Agent K and Jazz Dude. We want to give a special thanks to them. They're not Steinberg employees. They do it to make it a better community experience. And we also will give a special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. It's a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work with Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. And I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. Just a quick programming note, I will be on vacation next Friday through the 21st, and then I have meetings in California through the 21st, the entire week of the 21st. I'll have to check what my calendar is while my meetings, but I may not be able to do live streams for the next 2.5 weeks. I apologize for that. But I just want to give everyone kind of a heads up with that. So with that, we will go ahead and begin, but we will do today's and Tuesdays. All right. We see Tim K checking in from Zeist in the Netherlands with his cat Buddy, who's waving a paw hello to my cat Steven and Stella and other pets that are nearby ready to learn. All right, so we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. We have Raw Justice Hip Hop says checking in from Capitol Heights, Maryland. Says, as of yesterday, I'm officially a Cubase 14 user. Install was painless. Thanks for the tip, Greg. All right. Congratulations. Hope you got to take advantage of the current promotion. All right, so we have Da Vinci Girl checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. We have Taylor from Music for World Peace Records from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Music for World Peace Records asks, is it better to place chorus or cloner on individual of multi-vocals or on a group channel playing all of the vocals at once? So probably if you run into scenarios like that, usually it could sound a little more cohesive if it's going to be on like a group channel. So let me just open up a quick project, see if I have it in my recents list. Yeah. So if we wanted to process all background vocals together, so here I'm going to have a number of background vocals as they come in.
All at once you kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away. Don't it make you feel good?
So I would probably, like if I was going to kind of try to make something gel, make it a little more cohesive, I would probably just go to like the group track. So we have all of my vocals here coming on. And now I could apply an EQ, compressor, maybe a stereo enhancer, or a cloner. So if we wanted to open up like the cloner, we'll just say so now we can take kind of like vocals that, you know, so as we do work with this. So now if we turn off our processing, so that way I would probably, and there's no right or wrong answer to that, but I think it's pretty common for a lot of like, you know, processing background vocals, instead of running a compressor in each one, that you send it to a group to run a compressor on that as a collective entity. All right, so we see Music for World Peace Records asks, why is freeze MIDI modifiers on arpeggiator sometimes not accurate in Cubase 12? So I found it always to be pretty accurate, but one thing that it could be showing is, let's say if we have a recording, let me just go to this project here. If like a note starts a little bit late or early in the project. So let's say if I have an arpeggiator on my Rhodes here. All right, so we'll come over to the MIDI inserts. Let's go to my Arpache SX, and as we play back, let's say the Rhodes part here. Now, when sometimes as it gets, when people say that the freeze MIDI modifiers, I've had this from a couple of people, and let's say if we had chords here, and sometimes if the chord was a little bit off rhythmically, so let's say I can enlarge that part. Let's come here, let's say this one, these notes came in a little ahead of the beat. So now when we come over here, let's say if we glue all these parts together and we go to do a freeze MIDI modifiers, like we would expect the arpeggiator to be on the beat, but as we come over, let's just play this with the click. That because like the original note was slightly ahead or behind the beat, that would then render with all the notes slightly ahead or behind the beat depending on the note placement. So make sure that, you know, if it's like a rhythmic thing that's not tight, make sure that like the actual, you know, played parts are rhythmically on. Otherwise, the whole arpeggio could be off rhythmically. But let me know if it's off rhythmically or if it's off in pitch, so that information would be helpful. All right, from Raw Justice Hip Hop says, "Hey Greg, I upgraded from Cubase LE AI Elements 6 to 12, then Cubase 12 to 13 to 14. If I install Cubase 14 on a second computer, how much trouble will that be after May 20th, 25? If you already have the Cubase 14 license, you could, it's not contingent once it's been activated in your account. So once you've done the upgrade, you can install it on up to 3 computers. So I don't think you will have any problems. When you go to the new computer, just make sure that you would go to the license activation system. All right. Hang on one second. I have to make a quick, I'm just going to do a quick call here. Let me just check something real quick. 20 activation system. Hang on, I just have to do a quick phone call. I'll be right back. Sorry. All right, so I'm back. Let me just... All right, so yeah, and just to go back to Raw Justice question, so once you get to the new computer, you would just go to the Activation Manager, and within the Activation Manager, log in with your My Steinberg credentials, and then you could just simply see your activated licenses here, and you would want to activate it on your other computer, but you don't have to do any weird transition. So the transition that you probably went through was migrating from the e-licenser to the new Steinberg licensing, but now you can just simply activate it on up to 3 computers. All right, so you see for Taylor, it says, saw the focus key commands in March 21st live stream. I have it in Cubase 12. How is it to be used? All right, so I think that when I think what it'll allow you to do, sometimes like when you're setting up key commands or macros, you may have to, like if I set up a key command, but this is the active window, that if I was doing an editing key command, that we might not see it because it may not work because this isn't the active window. We can see kind of the active window by what's outlined in white. So we can now just come over here and see which zone is active. So I think that key command could just switch to being what is the active window if necessary. All right, so we have music for World Peace Records. Just says, is it possible to change the phase by a specific number of degrees? For example, if something is in phase and I want it 20 degrees out of phase to add to the stereo effect. So there isn't like a default amount of phase, but what a lot of people would do, if in essence, what you could do is, let's say if we zoom in like on this particular drum loop here, and when I have this selected, we can see that these are slightly out of phase or in phase. I will go ahead and just duplicate this track. All right, so if I invert the phase here, we can see that the direction of where the audio waveform is going up, that when the phase is inverted or the polarity is inverted, that we could just simply come right over there and these two would cancel out. So where one waveform is going up, the other one's going down, that would cancel out. Now if you wanted something to it's not, if you're looking to do like a quick chorusing type of effect, what you could do is as you zoom in, you could just take one of the files and you could just say the start time, and you could move the start time from the info line just slightly here. So if I move that and we play these two together, we may get more of like a chorusing effect. So if I select this and we move it, the start time, we have this at, and we could do that like down to the sample resolution. So now when we play it, but if I change my start time here, you could just adjust. And if we have our primary time display, I have this currently set to bars and beats, but if we switch this to samples, so while it's not representing like how much of the phase is, so let's say, I'll just make sure, so let's say we're in bars and beats. Okay, so now if I switch it to samples or milliseconds, I could adjust these two loops to play. So if we choose our start time, we could adjust it in samples here. So it gives you kind of, it may not be 20 degrees out of phase, but in essence, it's doing the same thing. So you could give that a try. Taylor? All right, wonderful to see Jazz Dude on. All right, we see Mark Rabin checking in from Montana, who's saying hi to Tim K and his cat Buddy. And everyone will give a big woof to Stella, Mark Rabin's dog, from all around the world. All right, we have Tony Trunzo checking in from Australia. Thanks for joining us. Very early in the morning. Sorry, my chat field just... All right, just find my spot, sorry. All right, so we see Uno Memento checking in from Finland. We have Jan from Cubase Index wishing everyone a happy Friday. All right, so we see Da Vinci Girl says no sound here. So I'll just check again, make sure the sound is going on. Check my monitoring computer. All right, so the monitoring computer has sound. Let me mute that. Okay. We have Hi Sherald. I'm always afraid I'm mispronouncing it. Just from Maryland, wishing everyone a happy Friday. Michael Graybill from Dallas, wishing everyone well today. All right, so Tony Trunzo asked, hi Greg, could you please show how to import key switches from Halion and how to set them up in Cubase 14 and how to use them, please? Okay, so let's say we're going to have a cello piece here. So let me just, all right, and this cello is coming from a Halion Sonic or Halion instrument. So when we come over here and we could play different articulation, so just like a cellist will play different styles with their bow or pizzicato. We have all these key switches that are available. Now with Halion instruments, the beauty of it is when we go to the key editor, so I'm going to double click and we'll see our editor functions in the inspector tab. So we select the track, we see the track. If I double click on the event, we see the editor. The inspector changes over to the editor. We'll see note expression. So we'll go to our expression map here. So we'll just say, so not note expression, but rather the expression map. We'll come over here and just say import key switches. Cubase automatically extracts the key switches from Halion. I think East West Instruments do this as well. This is part of the VST3 specification. All right, so now when we come over here, we'll see the velocity setting. So now what I want to do is just to select articulations and dynamics. So I'll kind of make this screen full size so we can see it. All right, so now you can say, okay, I want to start off with staccato. And let's say some of these notes I want to be pizzicato. So now as we play, so we could just have our different articulations. And now, so this will now switch to different instruments. So, and that way it's going to automatically switch between the different articulations in the project. So again, to get it, you want to get it set up automatically from Halion. We'll double click on the event. We'll go see the inspector change to the editor inspector. So if we see like the track inspector, double click on the event, go to the expression map. Where you see the expression map here, it may say no map, choose import key switches, and in the bottom, select articulations and dynamics, and then you can have your expression maps automatically created for you. All right, so we have Zandrol checking in from Mangochi, Malawi. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Jim Barclay joining from Texas. All right, Diamond District Studios from South Africa just says, hello, Greg Love from Cape Town. I solved my Nuendo and Isotope RX issue. I had to use RX monitor on an effects channel talking to RX standalone via direct offline processing. Okay, I'll make a note of that for further people that ask about that. Thanks for letting us know. All right, so we see from Dallas LaRue. Says, my PC is old, it's slow, and I'm going to get a new one next year, but until then, is there a way I can speed this one up? Deleting previous versions of Cubase, clearing temp files, and recycle bin. Having more, there are, and I'm sure if you go to the Cubase Nation Discord, there's probably some good tips for optimization. But, if your hard drives are nearly full, if you could get rid of or back up archive projects or get rid of files to give yourself a little more of a buffer, even getting more memory can make a big difference. And I think computer memory, it's probably going to be going up for those of us that live in America. Might be a good time to invest in extra memory if that's a available option. But there's lots of great, like how to optimize your PC, make sure one that when you go to your studio setup, you'll see when you go to your audio system that you're using ASIO on a Windows platform, make sure that you're using the Steinberg power scheme as well. That can make a big difference as well. And good luck with your transition. All right. But there's no magic thing to make your computer just instantly run better, but you could optimize it. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo says, Greg, we have lots of archives to hold us until you get back. So, yeah, I'll miss doing the live streams. I know I had a meeting canceled and I was in California, so maybe I could plan on doing a live stream on one day when I'm there. All right, so we have Rolling Stuff just saying, hi, Greg. Hope you're well, and greetings to all Cubasers from a sunny and spring-like Sussex in England. Sounds great. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Samuel Taki says, hello, sir. I'm from India. Thanks for joining us. There should be how much dB level in particular instrument track and how much should be level of dB during mastering. So it could really depend. It could depend upon your music. If you're doing something, like an ambient chill or a second movement classical piece, it's going to be kind of lower in levels dynamically. You may have different levels. So a lot of times people will try to aim for like their individual tracks, like a rule of thumb. And since it's a rule of thumb, it doesn't mean it's cast in stone or you have to work this way. I think every song can present unique opportunities for mixing and levels, but a lot of people will try to aim for maybe minus 12 dB on the tracks and perhaps minus 6 dB in the master mix, so that if you are sending off for mastering, that you have some headroom to work with. So if I had to kind of give an answer to that, I would probably think minus 12 dB for an individual track is a good place to be, and aiming for minus 6. All right, so we see Da Vinci Girl says, Daniela Tocan checking in from Bochum, using Cubase 12 Pro. Unless they offered to upgrade, I did not. It's because of VST2 and there's no backwards compatibility. So, VST2 still works on Windows platform, on the Mac platform. You could reach out to Apple and see if they want to add VST2 plugin support for Apple Silicon if you want to run it on Rosetta, but you could reach out to Apple. It's them that kind of made the choice on that, but you can still run VST2 on Windows platform. So make sure you reach out to Apple and let them know you want to run VST2 plugins, but I don't think they'll change it. All right, so Rick France checking in from Pacific Northwest. Thanks for joining us. Wonderful to see Sable Winters from Bay Area, California. It's better when Sable is on. We have Razel Zamini from Denmark. We have Mario 002 checking in from Romania. Thanks for being online with us this evening. All right. So we have Nazar Nadi Dian. Hello, Greg. When exporting a DAW project from Studio One to Cubase, the CC data is not there. Piano sustain pedal, CC64. Am I missing something to do in your last session? I asked, but the time was up. So let me just see if we could export something here. Sorry, I have some workers next door, so if you're hearing. Okay, so this will have some piano sustain. Just make sure. All right, so let's just export this. As DAW project. I'll put this on my desktop. let's just do a new project here. It's just might have to do it as a instrument track. Let me just change that real quick. Let me export it again. All right, so let's look at yes, it doesn't look like it's maybe imported. I'll pass that along. But you could always save the piano part as a MIDI file, but it doesn't look like that is imported when I just did the test here from Cubase to Cubase. So I'll bring that to the attention of the development team. Sorry about that. Okay, so we see Sable Winters is like number 22. Mark Raven's like number 25. All right, so we have Michael Graybill says, I'd like to do more with chord pads. I'm pretty sure I'm doing things the slow way. Can you demonstrate ways of creating custom pads and from existing parts to build a unique vocabulary on pads quickly? Okay, so let's say I have chord pads here. All right, so if we want to come over okay, so once I have chord pads, I can trigger from a MIDI controller our particular chords. Now, if I want to, if we want to select all of the chord pads and kind of start new, I could come here. So I'm going to take this progression from this song, and I'm going to select that track. We'll go to project menu to our chord track, and I'll just say, let's create chord events from our MIDI. And you could usually kind of check these different filters. And now let's see if I remember how to do this. So if we come over and we can say assign those chords from the chord track. So now we have the chords that we were using from the particular project. So now I could trigger these chords. And if I wasn't a good keyboard player, what I could do is just come over here. Let's say. So if we want to put our chord track as the MIDI input here, we could just say, okay, now I want the chord pads, and if we place this track into record, so now when we look at it, if you can't play those chords, if piano isn't your primary instrument, we can now trigger the one note and have those chords recorded. Now once we have our chord pads, we could also assign kind of different arpeggios. So if we say, okay, I want to come over here, let's go to a pattern, and we could just say, okay, I want to come over to factory presets. So let's say, okay, maybe I want, there's the default piano pattern. Now, if you wanted to kind of take a particular chord progression, let's say from here, let's just take a look at our piano part and say, and if we wanted to drag this pattern, I could now just kind of take a pattern and drag it over. So any little snippet that's like a little rhythmic pattern, but you can't play it over all the chords, you can now trigger the chords and use that as the basis for the pattern. And if you speed up or adjust the tempo, the pattern will automatically follow along. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see music for Real Peace Records. It says, in my freeze MIDI modifier question, it is the pitch that is off. It only happens occasionally. What could I be doing to cause it? So if you have a project where the pitch is off and it's not being one of the chords, just feel free to kind of send that to me. I'd be happy to take a look at it. And you can send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see Sable Winters, just give a big heart emoji to Jan from Cubase Index. All right, see John Koskian just says, thanks for asking a question, probably on the chord pads. All right, we have Darren Flake on. We have Jeff Zabelski checking in from Chico, California. We have Fly V, Vince from Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us. See, Jeff Zabelski says he used Spectral Layers 11 Pro yesterday. Sorry, my chat field jumped. Let me just find my spot. Okay, so I found my spot. Sorry about that. See Jazz Dude saying rest in peace to Val Kilmer, just mentioning, sent a link about the Doors movie. So yeah, he was a talented guy. And I liked his documentary. And got to watch Top Secret with my son a couple months ago. He liked it. All right, so you see from Roland Stuff says, hi Greg, after I've spent some time working on 4 harmony vocal parts in VariAudio for the first verse of a song, is there a way to replicate those harmonies for all other verses? Maybe by turning harmonies into MIDI parts to copy and paste or something like that. A long shot, I know, but that would be a real game changer for me if possible. Thanks, Greg. All right, so let's try it on this project. Let me just revert. All right, so I'm going to make my chord track here.
You stare at the ground, not a sound.
All right, so say we want to. All right, so let's say if we just come over here and I want, turn my snap off, I just want like this one particular phrase. So we have the chords laid out for us. Let's come over here, go to audio menu to generate harmonies. And we'll do 2 harmony voices. I think that if I wanted to so let's say if I want, so I'm not sure if it's the same words or not, but when we come over here, like if I wanted to just copy those parts, so I'm not sure if you want to copy the harmonies or if it's like going to be different words, like this is different words. But, you know, you could always just kind of, so if you didn't want to copy that, you could just say, okay, I want to come here for that phrase. And, you know, and because I think it actually generates harmonies kind of for the whole part. But when you want it to appear, we'll now have 2 additional tracks, so you could just kind of keep doing that same process. And then if you wanted to consolidate the tracks, you know, you could move these 2 up. So I think by the time you even copied something over, that you could duplicate the harmony, create and generate new harmonies just as fast. So let me know if that makes sense or if I'm misunderstanding. All right, we have Zai Fernando on. All right, so we have maybe SX Drew Jandis. He would love to learn some live looping performance tutorials. So, one of the things that you could do is, kind of set up, and I may not have such a great part of this. Let's see if I come over here and we wanted to set up particular loops. So when you say live performance loops, there's a lot of different aspects. So sometimes people will set up like markers. So let's say if I'm here, we could just, like if you're a live performance and you need to vamp something, what you could do is come over, let's add a cycle marker here. So you could get to the point where, let's say, as you're playing along, let's say you're kind of playing along here. Let me just.
And the sky turned magic blue.
And let's say you wanted to just kind of loop maybe this next part. You could just come over here and activate the loop. So if I wanted to double click on we could have like an arranger event, then you could just navigate it. So a lot of people will just have it to the point where you could just, double click between two markers, and you could set up like a macro to do that. So if you wanted to just kind of play a particular section, let's say you want to jump, you could just hit a key and jump and loop a particular region. So you could do different kind of performance tasks like that. But let me know if that's the kind of stuff that you want to get into. All right, so we see Dallas LaRue says he got a problem with the measures from the Pro Instrument bundle not lining up. It's just saying it's a preference settings. I'm glad you found that. I saw your email. Thanks for sending that. Tim K just says, great to see everybody. And he wants, Memento wants everyone to whack the like button. See, Jeff Sabelski says he's used expression maps since the Cubase 5 box set. I think it might have come in Cubase 6, maybe. I could be wrong. All right. You see Jeff Sabelski just saying, did a question about optimizing. I think it's Dallas LaRue's question about the old motherboard will give you maximum parameter stats. Mark Rabin just says, I also mentioned tremendous difference in performance with the last update, Cubase 14. All right, so we see Mark Rabin passing on, and Nick says hi to everyone. And Tim K is just saying, buddy's enjoying the afternoon sun in the back balcony. It's light working simple songs. All right. All right, so we see from Achilles says, hello, Cubase 14 Pro. Why, when I insert one MIDI track into my project, even if it's 150 bars when there are no notes inside some places. Automatically, the MIDI track's divided into multiple events and not one track. Okay, so let me just... Alright, so it says, why when I insert one MIDI track into my project, even if it's 150 bars, there are no notes inside some places. Automatically, the MIDI track's divided into multiple MIDI events and not one track. Alright, so let's say if I add, let's say if I come over here, I'll just add a MIDI track. Okay, and I'll do it with an instrument track and a MIDI track. So I'll just add a quick instrument track, and we'll just set it no instrument for now. All right, so with 14, we can now double click and create a single MIDI event without having to draw it. If we double click between left and right locators, it will automatically add, if there are left and right locators set up, and we click between that, it will add a MIDI event that's going to be the length between the left and right locators. So if I move my left and right locators here and I double click before or after, that would create an event that is 1 measure long. If I double click within the left and right locators, it will create a MIDI event that's going to be that fits with exactly within the left and right locators. So since the MIDI track's divided into multiple events and not in, if you run into this, you could also just, you know, if you wanted this MIDI event to stretch, so, you know, generally as we do this, there's no MIDI notes that are added, but you could grab the right edge and also just move it out. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding Achilles. All right, so DaVinci Girl asks, is there in Cubase 12 something like a sounding notation for instruments like different woodwind, tenor sax, alto sax, etc.? I do not score with the piano roll. All right, so let's come over and say I want to add an instrument. Let's come over and say I want to add a Howling Sonic, and I want to add a clarinet. So I'll come over here. So all right, so now let's say I want to, we'll have a blank part here. I'll go into my score editor. And let's say I'll just call this clarinet here to start. All right, so go into our score editor, and as we want to start entering in notes here, so I'll just grab my note tool. So that way you could actually kind of just hear the pitch if you, as you enter in. So you can hear the notes as you enter them in or as you hover over. Just like that. So you don't have to do it just in the piano roll. You see Jeff Sabelski just says generic sax sound pretty good on Cubase 12 samples. See Val Kilmer just also mentioning he played the role of a rock star in Top Secret 2. Many forget that role, so I always like that film, especially when you're talking about the coming up with a way in African countries, I think, or in underdeveloped countries, to like a big salination system to take salt from the water. And he was like, wow, what are they going to do with all that salt? It's amazing, you know. So. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. And Jeff Sabelski with Val Kilmer's passing just says cancer research is important. Science is good. So. All right, wonderful to see Rick from Bratman Studio in Whittier, California. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Nick, and he had got Google to let him type, so he's very happy. Yay. All right, glad to see you, Nick. Hope you're well in Essex in England. All right, we see from DaVinci Girl says, I do not play Cubase 12 samples for sax. I use physical modeling sax sounds of Yamaha VL70M generator. So you can just add a MIDI track and have it go out to your VL70 and have that automatically use that for your sounds as well in Cubase. So Michael Teams is already doing his virtual ice cream distribution. Sounds like a great day for virtual ice cream. All right, Babel asks, hey Greg, is there a quick way to render in place and replace the same file name? All right, so let's say I want to take this clarinet part here. All right, so my 21st century clarinet composition, so I want to render this. So if I select the particular, so I want to render this to audio, so I'm going to select this particular event here. I'm going to select the track as opposed to the event. And when we go to render in place, so we'll go edit to render in place. We'll go to the render settings. Now, when you go to the track, you actually get, as opposed to the events, you get some additional functions where you could just say remove source tracks. So now when I render in place this track, we'll say render. It'll render, and now the MIDI has automatically turned directly into an audio event. So if we want to, we'll bring up the volume here. So that way it just automatically replaced it and it carried over the name for you. So again, we could just take the MIDI, so don't select the event, select the track, go to your edit menu to render in place, go to render settings, and for the source track settings, just choose to remove the source track. And now that instrument track is automatically migrated directly to a audio track. So give that a try. All right. Okay, so you see from Babel's next question is, also I get this weird message recently. Audio events not completely in sync. Group editing could fail after dividing audio events by warp markers. So if we were doing like an audio recording, let me just, maybe I'll replicate it here. So let's say if we were doing a recording and the lengths of this recording were slightly different. So let me just, I'll just come here. So let's say this recording started a little early. This one started a little late. So when we have this and we want to do like a quantizing, so I'm going to take this entire folder here, and we can just choose to activate the project first. That would help. So it's because when we're kind of treating, like when we're doing kind of a drum quantizing, it's kind of expecting that all the events were maybe recorded at the same time. So now when we come over and we want to do like quantizing, or if we do maybe like the phase coherent audio warp, and it says that these may require the lengths, positions of the warp markers, like bounce. So sometimes you may run into scenarios like that because it's kind of expecting all the lengths to be the same, so that when we're doing like a free warping, that it knows where to look for all the different tasks. So let's say if I am coming here, a lot of times if we are choosing to do, let's say, group editing on this particular instrument and we want to do like quantizing, here we could set kind of our priorities. So you may get that message. Oftentimes you can ignore it. So a lot of times, but it's just kind of giving you a warning that if some of the results don't line up, it's because maybe the start position and the recordings, which ideally should be kind of the same length if you're going to be doing like a quantizing applied to all of the different tracks. So that's why it may ask you to render the files first. A lot of times you get away with it and it's not a big deal. So just be aware that that's what it's kind of expecting, everything to kind of be in a particular state before you do approach like a multi-track quantizing scenario. All right, you see Michael Teams is granted Sable Winter's 1 gallon of key lime pie ice cream. All right. And we see from Babel, it says, so I wonder what's the best phase alignment workflow in Cubase. Let me just open up a different project. So it could depend if you want to do like kind of phase alignment or if you want to do quantizing. So let's say we have this project here. We have multi-track drums. All right, so if we had like a phase issue, let's say we will just look at our kick drums here, or we have 2 snares. Let's take a look at snares. All right, so let me just... So we have snare top and let's say snare bottom. So we'll make these obnoxiously large. All right, so when we come here, if, one of the things that you could do, if you want to do kind of more of a phase alignment between 2 tracks, we can come over here, select one as the reference track. Okay. And then select another one as the target track. And now we could just come over here and align the audio. So if the snares are, so you could do stuff like that if it's, if you're trying to get stuff aligned. If you want to just, move the events. So if I come over here and they're kind of like the phase is okay between them, and I want to just come over here and do like a free warp. So I will select the free warp tool here. And let's say as I'm coming here to my snare tracks, I can now, at this point, if I wanted to just warp the snares together, we could do that very easily, or the kicks together, or, you know, so this would allow us to do kind of traditional warping. Now, if I wanted to treat it more as like an audio quantizing, where let's say I will take this approach, we'll start from scratch here. And as we listen to our drums, that the drums aren't quite as tight with a click. So say where we have fills, like that snare fill was a little fast, it sped up. So if we wanted to, you know, find hit points for our drums, a lot of times the hit points will automatically be detected. So I want to come over here, let's kind of massage the hit points a little bit. Let's say I'll do the same for my snare. So we want to not include tracks that are bleeding through, but only like when the snare is hitting. In this case, let's come to my hi-hat. So often just make sure you're getting, like, you don't want the snare in the hi-hat track. So now that I've done some quick hit point kind of tweaking, just a bit, not a lot, we could now come over and we could select all the tracks and we could give kind of a priority. So let's say as we're beginning, I want my kick to have the highest priority. So we'll just kind of come over here and let's say snare, I want, and let's say hat. So let's give this like 3. All right, so now they've done this, we could choose to, we'll click on create. And at this point, we could now just come over and say, okay, for our quantize, I want this to be quantized to 16th notes. And we could now just kind of quantize all of your different elements here to 16th notes. So that's kind of like a more traditional multi-track quantize. You could do that as well. All right, let me just revert this. Okay. Okay, so we see one more question. Overwriting CC data expression or mod wheel with the controller is still a hassle. The fader track is resisting the previous data, and the process is not smooth. Any suggestions? All right, so let's take a look. So generally, when you replace the MIDI CC, you want to be within the particular editor. So let's come over. Okay, so let's say we have just one note here, and I will write in some modulation data. Okay, so I'm going to now just come over, grab my line tool. And let's go ahead and just write in. Just take off my. All right, so let's say we'll just have our automation, like our CC data, like that. All right, so come over, you're going to go to, if you haven't done this, we go to the Cubase preferences or settings. We will, then I think it's under MIDI. We want to go under record to MIDI. And then you want to replace the recording in the editors. So I'm going to replace my controller here. All right, so now I'm going to record in the editor itself. So now exactly what I recorded replaced the existing MIDI CC. So do it not from the project window, but from within the editor, and make sure that you have your settings, MIDI, under the go to preferences or settings to record, MIDI, and then you'll see replace recording in editors, and choose the controller, and then just overwrite your modulation data or your expression. Okay, so I say just got new hot mess projects from Gareth. All right. Rick France says, hi Greg, really like MediaBay for searching in preview, but need some additional VSTs on a regular basis. Is there a way to show contact or other library vendor instruments in MediaBay? Thanks. So if you go through, and I realize this is probably impractical, VST3 as a plugin architecture has VST presets. And any VST3 preset that's created will automatically, be searched and referenced in MediaBay. So many companies have their own preset architecture that's kind of proprietary. So if you wanted to, you could open up a particular patch, save it as a VST preset. So if you save it as a track preset, so if you come here, save track preset with the instrument on that particular sound, you could then recall those sounds within MediaBay. I know that it's probably not practical to do that for thousands of different sounds, but that would be the way that it's available in MediaBay. It's just Native Instruments has chosen not to support the VST.VST preset format. So maybe you can reach out to them and see if someone has done it internally. There could be a good chance. Or see if the other instruments that you use, but as you use an instrument, save it as a preset, and then you could recall that in MediaBay anytime. So, yeah, they're just not using kind of the VST3 presets standard. All right. Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. We see Randy from ProWash DFW. Thanks for joining us today. All right, let me just... My chat field jumped on me. Let me just find it. Okay, so. All right, so you see from Babel, is there a way of turning off moving events by dragging on the side? Would hope that it'll always be either stretch, make a fade, or lengthen the event, not move it. I could do that by dragging it from the middle. So let me just, is there a way to turn off moving events by dragging on the side? All right, so let's say, so if we're here, so we could elongate the event by kind of, I'll make this larger so it's more obvious to see. All right, so if we are just in the event here, so we could choose to copy the event there. Okay, so you want to turn off moving events by dragging on the side. All right, so if you select the event and move it, it will move. You could choose to lock the track. So if you wanted to lock the track, that way it's never going to move. You could also choose to lock just the position of the event so that it doesn't move. So if you lock the position, and then you could still make copies, and still, if you wanted to, if you have like an audio event, do your fades, but this way it's not actually moving the particular event. So, and if we were doing an audio event here, so if I, let's say, locked the position of this, let me just see if we have lock. So I'm going to just enable lock here. So now I could lock the position. So I can't move the event, but I could still do my fades and duplicate. So if you didn't want to accidentally move it, try maybe locking the position. If you don't see lock here, right click and make sure that you have lock visible. So let me know if that works for you. All right, you see Michael Teams has granted Jeff Zabelski 1 gallon of Dreamsicle ice cream. So you see Michael Graybill says, aha, knew there was a faster way. Thank you, Greg. That's great. Perfect. Even loads of ways to make with that approach. The handy winterized patterns work too. Very cool. So, yeah. All right. Okay, so Babel asks, what is a way of changing between having the cursor / playhead move back to the previous start position or stopping where it stopped in timeline during playback? So prior in Cubase 12 and earlier, it was a preference that people couldn't find, and then we moved it to a more obvious place, or Steinberg moved it to a more obvious place. So it changed. So if you come to transport and you'll go to start mode, here you could say return to start position on stop. So if I start here and now I stop, it goes back to its time to where it started. When this is unchecked, it will stop and then continue on from the stopped position. So now if we want to, so again, go to transport, to start mode, and you could turn it on and off right here on return to start position on stop. So I think that's from Cubase 13 and higher. All right, John Costigan has received 1 gallon of butter pecan ice cream. All right, so we see Dallas LaRue. In studio setup, what is the difference between Yamaha Steinberg USB ASIO and Steinberg built-in ASIO driver? The checkbox and the checkbox release driver when application is in the background. All right, so the Yamaha Steinberg USB driver, ASIO driver, that's going to be if you have like a Yamaha or Steinberg audio interface. So if you have like a UR22C, UR44C, an AXR unit, that's the driver that would work for. Or if you're utilizing, let's say, a Yamaha digital mixer, like a DM3, or using an MG mixer that has like USB out, or what I'm using for my live stream, an AG08, I would select that particular driver. So that works with Yamaha or Steinberg hardware, the Yamaha Steinberg USB ASIO driver. And we have the Steinberg built-in ASIO driver that's utilizing, sometimes you may have like the built-in audio interface of your computer. Like if you have a laptop or desktop, you probably have a way to, people often use the built-in audio interface to play back, sound from a YouTube live stream like we're on now. So that's the driver. If you don't have a dedicated ASIO driver for your system, this allows you to run an audio interface that doesn't have a dedicated ASIO driver, so that we could wrap it in an ASIO driver to minimize the latency. So with any audio interface, as long as it has like a Windows sound driver and you don't have a dedicated ASIO driver, let's say for your Realtek sound card that's on your laptop or your PC, then you would use this Steinberg built-in. So it's using the built-in audio interface. All right, and the second part to the question, what does the checkbox release driver when application is in background? So, and we could do this from your studio menu. Let's get to the studio setup. We'll select this, and we have this option here. And what this will allow you to do is, you may notice that sometimes Cubase because Cubase could be using the same audio interface that you're using for YouTube. So, but it could be using different drivers. So within Cubase, you'll be probably using the ASIO driver. Within the operating system, you're using what's called a WDM driver. So what this is going to allow you to do is, when you want to use the same audio interface, and what would happen to a lot of people is they would be working in Cubase, they want to check out something on it like a YouTube live stream, they would go, but Cubase didn't release the audio driver for it to switch into the Windows driver mode for the same audio interface. So what this allows you to do is, when you're in YouTube, you could be running the Windows driver. When you're in Cubase, it goes back to the Cubase driver. So it allows you to kind of use that audio interface for Windows applications, as well as for under a dedicated ASIO driver once you're inside of Cubase. All right. Let's see. All right, Babel just says, also the modifier command shift doesn't work for me when I'm using the range tool to highlight parts of the waveform. Where can I find a modifier key in the key commands or settings? So generally it's going to be, I think, Alt or Option plus Shift. So if I wanted to come here, I'm going to grab, so make sure, one, that you're in the range tool, and it's Alt or Option plus Shift, I think is the command. So let me just, make sure I have my keyboard in Mac mode here. But you could set it, let me just make sure I have it set right. So if you come here to the preferences, go to editing, to tool modifiers, to range tool, and then, okay, so yeah, I guess maybe it is Command Shift, sorry. So now when we come over, then I could just kind of hover and adjust the volume there. So make sure And if you're in Nuendo 14 versus Cubase, I think Nuendo, it might not be defined. But again, go to your preferences, to settings, editing, tool modifiers, select the range tool, and you'll see audio segment editing. Then you can see the modifier keys or change the modifier keys right there. All right. All right, Sam Brashear just says, Greg, can you explain what the Stream Deck is used for in Cubase? So let's say you have a hard time memorizing keyboard shortcuts. So what the Stream Deck allows you to do is, instead of having to memorize, like when I want to do range editing and crop versus split versus delete or cut time, instead of having to, if you're not someone who's good at memorizing keyboard shortcuts in your workflow, and it's totally fine. I remember working with Hans Zimmer one day, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so jealous that you can memorize all the keyboard shortcuts." And why you see him and a lot of composers that have a big, huge tablet in front of them, what they're doing is, snap on and off, trigger this particular function. So what the Stream Deck allows you to do is to program different key combinations and to set a label on a little screen. And that little screen could say snap on and off, so that you could always hit that button to trigger a keyboard shortcut or to trigger, you could also have it trigger a MIDI event, so that the MIDI event itself could be, so that when you push a button, it's sending a MIDI note message at a particular note and a particular velocity value if you want. So it just allows you to, expand your keyboard shortcuts, but each of the buttons on the Stream Deck can be labeled, and then you could have, like mine, I think has 32 labels on it, and then you could have those within a folder of a subfolder of a subfolder. So this way you could kind of have access to all of your functions without having to kind of go menu diving or to remember or memorize keyboard shortcuts. If some people's brains just don't work well at memorizing keyboard shortcuts. If you ever see someone who's blind, like Stevie Wonder's incredibly fast on Cubase because he knows all the keyboard shortcuts, because that's how he drives it, not from a mouse, not visually. It's just all keyboard shortcuts for him. So if you have a hard time memorizing keyboard shortcuts, this way you could program keyboard shortcuts with labels on each of the little buttons, so that particular function can be executed without having to memorize the keyboard shortcut. All right, wonderful to see Vishnu on from India. All right, so we got a question from Audionomi, who just asks, hi Greg, is there a way to use the VariAudio automatically like Pitch Correct plugin does? So it's not going to like automatically turn it on and it will correct pitch. Now, a lot of times those maybe not, they could be like easier to approach, but if you wanted like a really simple approach to using VariAudio, we could come over here. Let's go to VariAudio. If you wanted like a one button solution, just select all of the events and just go to correct pitch, and then you could just correct pitch on everything automatically in real time as well. So it's not where you like choose the key, but what you could do is select all of the VariAudio notes and just come right over here and we'll correct the pitch, and you could just do it like that. But it's not like a turn it on and correct as it plays back. But in essence, it's kind of doing the same thing. All right, SE Tracks asks, hello Greg, when I make an effects bus and route it sounds doubled. What am I doing wrong? All right, so let's go ahead and let's just create an effects bus here. Let's see. Okay, so let's just turn off my sends here. All right, so let's say we have, here, I'll just revert this quickly.
You stare at the ground.
All right, so I'm going to take. All right, so when I do this, I'm going to just add an effects track here. And I'm going to select the track. And let's say I want to add a reverb. So I'll just come over. Let's add an effects track to the selected channel. Let's say reverence.
How can I feel you? How can I see?
So now as I come over here,
you're running hide from the light. Be someone tonight.
all right, so as we open this up, let's just.
You stare at the ground, not a sound. Tell me why something's wrong. We can't go on.
So if I want to add, let's say we'll just put on a plate.
How can I feel you? How can I see when you're running hide from the light?
So and you could also, let's say if you wanted to take that reverb off as an, let me just make sure. All right. So generally it says when I make effects bus and route it. So I'll just add. So let me just go to the vocal here, and I'm going to, let's say if I add an effects bus here. So I'm going to add like a delay. So let's say if we come here, I'm going to add an effects channel, another approach. So I'll just put a delay on it.
Something's wrong.
So now I want to route this track to the studio delay, and this will add probably what we consider a double.
How can I feel you? How can I see when you're running hide from the light?
So, depending on the effect, like, if you have a delay effect, that could make it sound doubled. If you're adding reverb, it shouldn't sound doubled either way. If you're adding it, as an effects channel and it's, being added here, you should be, it's not really sounding double, but let me know if I added my effects channel differently than you did. So you can add the effects channel and route the particular track to it, or just automatically do it when you add an effects channel to the selected channels. So let me know if that helps. All right, so Babel asks, is there a way for Cubase to make automatic fades when cutting up audio? All right, so let's say There is a function here that is auto fades setting, so you could automatically activate fade ins, fade outs, and crossfades. So you don't see this visually, but let's say if, because a lot of times when we cut, let's say if we're cutting our audio file here, we could have the snap to zero crossfades check. So if I wanted to split the audio right where this cursor is, where we see the amplitude, and I go to cut, it's actually not going to allow me to cut right at that point. It's going to make the cut elsewhere where there's a zero crossing point. But there's also just, if we activate the auto fades settings for the track, we can cut anywhere. So if we turn this off, and you don't see this visually, it just does it on playback, which is kind of the ultimate goal. So let's say if we make cuts along here, let me just take off my snap. So we may hear, so if you're doing edits and you've done lots of cuts, so let's see if we trigger anything. You can just come right here and just activate auto fades, and what that'll do is automatically just add, I think it's a 10 millisecond fade in, fade out, or crossfade anytime that there's a cut or a new audio segment starts. So just come right here and activate the auto fades settings. Okay, so 5E says, I'm sort of setting up my old PC now as a sample storage device. My Cubase works on both of them as well. I thought you could only be authorized on one computer. I'm with Splice. So the Steinberg license allows you to actually run it on, you can run it on 3 computers. I think you're only supposed to be running one active license at a time, but you could run it on 3 different computers. If you have a work studio machine, a laptop, and a home studio machine, you could run it on those 3. All right, so we see Babel says, I'm used to Logic, so when I activate a loop, I expect playback to start at the beginning of the loop. That's not how it works in Cubase, but what is the way of starting at the beginning of a loop? So one of the things that you could do is, there's a handy little key command if you use the Alt or Option plus the P. So let's say I have a range set here. So I'm going along, I have a range set. If you hit Alt or Option plus P,
How can I see when you
so that will automatically engage. So let's say if we're here, so let's say now if we're playing along, and now there's a new key command. Let me see if I could find it. Let's see if it's maybe under that you could play the selection solo. So let's say if I'm here, I could just, and I hit Alt or Option plus P, we can loop that region. Now, if I want to play a range, so I have this range selected. If we go to transport, this was added in 1402. So you can say play selection solo. So this would be, I think, Command Shift plus the space bar. So if we do this, let me just select. So if I have just this range selected here, my Apple maybe, but you can now come over And let me just program that from the MIDI remote quickly here. So I'll say, okay, I want this button, and we'll play selection solo. And let's say I want the button below it to play the selection range. So now if I come here, we can play the range or just play it solo as well. So some new options there, but it's always helpful if you're doing like live loops. You can just set this up and Alt P, and you could just loop that selection automatically. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Babel. So you see from Roland stuff. Hi again, Greg. Thanks for tackling my question about the replicating harmonies and other verses. I was actually wondering whether the VariAudio MIDI notes could be copied on rather than the audio. So I don't think it actually converts it to MIDI. It's always going to be an audio process, and then those segments can be converted to MIDI afterwards. So it's not converting it to MIDI, figuring out the harmonies, and then generating the harmonies. It's actually just generating the harmonies, and then it could extract the MIDI information afterwards. So it's not going to automatically have the MIDI that you could copy over for that. So I'll pass that along as a feature request. All right, question from Babel. How do you set up true mono in the control room and save as a preset? I'm using just the left monitor to monitor a mono signal. So when we come over, you'll see the down mix presets. So let's say I'm in stereo, and if I just click here to mono, so instead of, it's actually summing it in mono here. So and I think that we could just toggle back and forth. So let's take a look. Let's say I want to come here. Let's go to control room. And let's see if we could just do a down mix. So we can say select next down mix preset. So if I go between mono, so now as we're playing along, I can just hit that button and switch between mono and stereo. Alright, so let me know if that's helpful. Alright, Ricky Tera says wheel scroll doesn't work on send in inspector. Is a great way to automate FX sends. Is there a way to turn that on, or can we have a way to get a fader like Pro Tools? Alright, well, what you could do is it's just a preference. Because a lot of people, when they were navigating and had multiple tabs open, they didn't want to necessarily be here and intend to navigate up or down. So if we go to your preferences or settings, and I think if we go to editing project and mix console, there'll be scrolling, disable scroll mouse wheel for parameter change. So preferences or settings to editing, project and mix console, disable mouse wheel for parameter change. Uncheck that, and once that's unchecked, you can come over here. We'll select our sends, And now just using our mouse scroll wheel, we could automate that again. So once again, preferences or settings. Under editing, project and mix console, scrolling, disable mouse wheel for parameter change. Uncheck that and you'll have the previous behavior. So, all right, wonderful to see Balsa checking in from Montenegro. Always wonderful to see Kerwin Young from Atlanta, Georgia. All right, Babel says, thanks for answering my question about render in place. I only have two options in my render in place: mute source tracks or leave some tracks as they are. So it depends, again, if you have an event selected. So if I'm here, my event is selected. I go to render in place, go to my render settings. I only have two choices, two options available here in the bottom. When no event is selected, so maybe click on an empty spot and we have the track selected. Now we go to render in place and now we have four options because no events are selected, just the track itself. That way it's going to do the entire track. So again, make sure no events are selected and just the track is selected, and then you'll see the other options available for removing the source tracks. All right, wonderful to see Troca on. All right, we have Michael Jensen checking in from northern Denmark. Thanks for joining us. Always wanted to go to Denmark. All right, we see Val checking in from Vienna, Austria. And he says he's currently configuring his new Stream Deck XL for Cubase. All right, have fun. All right, Balsa asks, when opening a project, Cubase opens fast, but it's unresponsive for 5 seconds until it connects and lights up my MIDI remote controller, X-Touch 1. Only then can I start using it. Any help? So let me know if the controller isn't connected, if it boots immediately. So it may be just kind of sending MIDI messages to the device itself, or the device is maybe switching modes, maybe from like a Mackie control to a MIDI control. So maybe the device itself is kind of reinitializing itself. So if it's actually, if it boots up and you don't notice any delay without it connected, make sure that, because those devices can be in like a Mackie control or like a MIDI mode. So make sure that it's always going to be booting up in MIDI mode, because it may have to transition and kind of switch from sending out MIDI messages or sending out the Mackie control protocol. So it could be just switching. I don't have an X-Touch 1, so I don't have any personal experience with it. All right, we see Michael Teams is granted. Let's see. I've gotten 1 gallon of fresh blackberry ice cream for my family and myself. It's good. It's my son's birthday on Sunday. I'll save it for Sunday and surprise him. Thank you, Michael. And Kerwin Young has received 1 gallon of amaretto chocolate ice cream. All right, so we see from Troka, it says, Sensei, my eyes keep deteriorating and I keep on path to Dawless, though I can't allow myself to drop Cubase. I seem to have to drop my bit depth and sample rate, and from audio takes I'm moving into sampling and looping. Am I to start working projects on my worst bit depth and sample rate, or am I to keep working hi-fi and then convert to samples at the end? So I would say there's no, unless you have like a super old, 25-year-old computer, I think that you're always fine working at the highest sample rate. So I understand with like vision issues, I have my own vision issues. So but I think just because you can look at everything on your computer screen doesn't mean that you have to. Like just because you can do so many different things, I would rather have the flexibility to, I think a lot of kind of sampling, like hardware sampling workflows. I think why a lot of that music sounds the same is because you have a lot of inherent limitations, and those limitations kind of shape your music and often limit the musical capabilities of your project. And people, sometimes like, oh, I get stuff done so fast, and sometimes they could work fast, but when you get to need to actually do something for to solve a musical problem or to solve a technical problem, if you let it persist just because the tools you're using aren't doing it well, I think that's a wrong approach. So I think if I was approaching Cubase I've helped lots of blind and visually impaired people over the years. I think that you could work Cubase in the same workflow. So don't be afraid to try to come up with a new workflow that works with your vision capabilities. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. Bilbao, España. All right. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. Let me find my spot. Okay. Wow. Michael Teams has granted Gareth. We can see who Michael likes the most. 12 gallons of Rocky Road ice cream for him and his daughter Lola. That's very generous. All right, so we see Daniel checking in from Croatia. He says he loves Cubase. So we see Marcus Strymon says, Greg, how do you like the included Arturia plate reverb? Not sure if it's worth the upgrade. I think if you get Cubase 14, if you're thinking about, I think Cubase 14 is worth the upgrade. I haven't critically listened to it. I'm hoping to have some time on Sunday to kind of play in my studio a bit. And I was going to kind of go through all the new plugins in the Premium Partners product. But I always like plate reverbs. In general, I think Arturia does a great job with their plugins. So I could probably have a better answer on Tuesday after I have some real experience with it. But I think, the upgrade to 14 is well worth it, and you might as well get that and all the other Premium Partner products as well. So, all right, Kerwin Young likes the Amaretto chocolate choice from Michael Teams. And Michael responds, it's very savory. Rick France says, thanks, Greg. Presets will help some. All right, so we see a question, if you put something on the control room like span, it will affect the sound or not. So let me just look what span is. All right, so it looks like it's just a spectrum analyzer, so it shouldn't have any impact on the sound. I don't think it's going to actually be processing any audio. So, like when I come over here and I put on, let's say we go to our stereo. And we open up like Supervision. Here we're not affecting the sound, but we can see with metering what's going on in the particular processing. So generally meter plugins don't affect the actual sound that's going on in the project. It's just kind of monitoring what's happening, but shouldn't alter the sound unless it's doing something really wrong. All right, Jack Bourne asks, what do you think of using expression maps for drum kit articulations? So I think that most articulations for drums, some will, like if we come over to like a, so I think that usually drum articulations aren't going to be often used for expression maps. I think often when we're dealing with, just show an example here, when we're dealing with kind of changing the sound of different drums, most of it's going to be kind of velocity based. Some stuff will be kind of controller based, but let's say if I come here and we open up a drum kit and we're playing just a hi-hat, so come over and we'll get to the kit. So let's say for all right, let me just some of the hi-hats will respond to, like if I move my modulation wheel, but most of the drums are going to respond to like velocity is going to be by far the vast majority. So, if you wanted to have the different dynamics, and then if you wanted the hi-hat to kind of be opened or closed, some of those aspects, like often velocity, let's say on ride cymbals, we'll come over, let's say, okay, let me just, so even as we go to the ride, so like this would be almost like a bowing articulation of what you would do for a cymbal, would just kind of be triggered by velocity. So the higher the velocity or lower the velocity, like the higher the velocity, you get closer to the bell of the ride cymbal. So stuff like that. So I think that for the vast majority of drums, I think it's going to translate better to the velocity. And MIDI does that really well from keyboards or drum controllers or pads or electronic drum kits. That's kind of like the natural experience that how a drummer would change. So I think that works really well. So I would say that probably expression maps aren't best used for drums. All right, so we have a question. It says, it seems to me in the previous versions of Cubase, when you moved an audio container, you saw the waveform shift before releasing the mouse button. So let's give it a shot. So if I come here and I want, so if I just move it, you can see that if I hold down, let's say my Alt or Option key, we can see and make a copy like that. So I think that's been pretty consistent. So, and if I start moving it and then press the Alt or Option key, then we can see the audio in its original spot, and then I could just place it freely where I want. All right, so we see Robert Lofgren says, Greg, do you know if anything is being done to address that Nuendo Live will stop recording if the audio engine glitches ever so slightly? I haven't heard of that issue. I've seen sometimes when, people are recording, like 200 shows on the same drive of, 96 tracks, that their drive gets, fragmented. It could also be if you're dealing with clock, and, because Nuendo can use like the MIDI time, you can use, I think it could basically convert the MIDI time code into like the time of day for the recording. So if you're doing sync, if you're doing MIDI time code sync, that could cause kind of a glitch. But if you have like a specific issue that you want to send to me, I'm happy to pass it along, but I haven't really heard of many issues, and I kind of deal with lots of people who use it, like the Kennedy Center in U.S. and other facilities. All right, so you see from Michael Teams, howdy Greg, still don't have the cue setup under my hands. Please go over the cue setup for me, thanks. And he says T-Rex over here. All right. All right, so let's say we want to set up a cue mix, and setting up headphones for, let's say you're recording, and each musician wants their own More Me headphone mix. Okay. So let me adjust this project here quickly. Okay, so we want to set up the control room. So I'll just revert this quickly. Okay, so let's say, all right, so we have in this case, let's say we have a band, we have bass, drums, and let's say guitar and vocals. So we want to set up like 4 headphone mixes. I'm going to come over here to my mix console. One of the great things you can do in 1402 that's really handy is now you can just hide the faders. So let's come over and say we want to we'll go to our setup here. We'll make sure that we have our cue sends. All right, so what we want to do first is I'm going to have my cue sends here on the bottom. We'll just kind of zoom. All right, so we want to set up cue send, so we will go to our audio connections, and we'll go to the control room. So here we're going to have, let's say, vocals, drums, guitar, bass. Okay, so we have these, and what we're going to do is basically we're going to define where these headphones are connected from your audio interface or your converter. So we would say, okay, outputs 3 and 4 are going to the vocals, headphone, output 5 and 6 to the singer, 7 and 8 to guitar, 9 and 10 to drums, whatever. Okay, so once we have those routing set up, what I want to do is I'm going to, let's see if we can just kind of right click over here and actually do this all in the, all right, let's come over here. We'll go to the right zone here. All right, so we can see in the control room, let me just see if I could come over here. So we go to our control room side, and we can see like, and what I'm going to do is right click, and we're going to say, we will come over and we'll say all cues from selected. So I want to enable all cues. So I'm going to activate all the cue sends. And first I'm going to select all the tracks that I want to activate. So let me do that. So let me just come over. And I'll just, sorry. I'll select all my tracks here on my project window. Okay, so we'll come over to our cues here. So we'll say all cues. So we're going to activate all the cue sends. And so we're going to do this to all the selected channels. And what I want to do, again, is kind of right-click in the cue mix area in the control room. And I'm going to say, let's use the current mix levels so that the mixer faders are automatically replicated here. Let's come over and go to all cues, and we want to use the current pan levels. Okay, so now when we want to build our cue mix, we could just come right over here. Okay, so first of all, I want to listen to the different cue mixes. So when we want to come over here, let's say the bass player wants to hear more of the bass in their headphone mix. So I'm going to increase this fader here. And now when we come over, we're going to listen to, let's say, our different cue mixes. So we'll say Q4, the bass is louder here. All right, I'm going to select all of my drums. And I'm going to go to the drum cue mix here, and I'm going to activate the cue link, and I'm going to increase the drums. So when we go to cue mix 2, the drums are really loud. So this is what the drummer's hearing in their headphone mix. And let's say the drummer's like, hey, I need more bass. So we're going to take the bass track and send the bass to the drums. And let's say the bass player's like, can I get more kick in my headphones? So we would go to the kick track and send more of the kick to the bass. So we could just come over here and say, okay, we're going to send more of the kick to the bass player's headphone mix. Let's go to the guitar. So we want to take the guitar and send more of the guitar into the guitar's headphone mix. And now we could listen to the guitar player's headphone mix. That's what they want to hear. This is what the drummer wants to hear, and this is what the bass player wants to hear. So now we have our different cue mixes: a guitar mix, drums, and we have the vocals. So again, now that we could kind of do this all when we hide the faders or not, you could have a keyboard shortcut just to do that. You could do all the cue mixes in the lower zone, which you couldn't do before 14. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Michael. Okay. All right, so Sleep Talker says, Chad's Unite, if you like metal music, like volumes and periphery, check us out. All right, so we have Stallion de la Torda Oficial. I have UAD plugin running on TSP. Any chance to view the plugin in 150 scale image? So probably, it could be, so probably, if we come over, let's go to your settings. So not all plugins are high DPI, but if you're on a Windows platform, what you could do is come over to General. You could try toggling the high DPI. It isn't on the Mac version. So, but you'll also see program scaling. So you could scale the application independently of the scaling that you have for the operating system. But I'm not sure if the UAD plugins are scalable independently. So generally it's going to be like for the application or for the operating system. Okay. All right, we see Dean Garvey Jazz just purchased the Cubase 14 Pro upgrade. Congratulations. Take advantage of the current promotion. All right, Jeff Zabelski says, French press dreamsicle coffee. Finally, I could wake up proper and write a new song with lyrics. Never to say. All right. Michael Team says, cool. Gareth is saying, evening, Master Greg. Hope you're well, Gareth. Okay, so yeah, I saw the email from Gareth for some new Hot Mess tunes. Let me know if you got the one file that I sent you. I probably sent a later one that afterwards that may have fixed an editing error on my part. All right, you see Michael Team, or we see Mark Rabin says he's probably going to step out, but maybe back in time. All right, so we see from Daniel in Croatia, says I checked the release driver thing, but it still wouldn't let me play YouTube until I got to UR24C. If I take my laptop and go practice Cubase in the library, do I have to carry my audio interface? There may be a setting. I had one laptop that like the kind of switching between the release driver and background was actually set up as a function in like super buried. It took me like 15-20 minutes to find it within the control panel for the built-in audio interface on the laptop, so that could be conflicting as well, so you may have to dig around to find that. Always wonderful to see Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. All right, so we see Tim K just says for his keyboard shortcuts, he got the Logitech keyboard Astra labeled for Nuendo and Cubase, glows or not, with variable brightness. It's color-coded by function groups, and it's high quality. Sounds great. I'll have to check that out. And he says available on Apple and PC versions. That's cool. My son just got a new mechanical gaming keyboard he's all excited about. We can customize all the colors. All right, so we have Peter from Montreal. It says, hello, Greg. Well, deleting older versions of Cubase, example 11.12 from this directory. See, users, Peter, download Steinberg 164. Have any adverse effect on the version 13.14? So, no, it's just the installer data for the earlier versions. So you could delete it without consequence. You could always download it later. All right, so Steve Green says, Greg, I like a snare sound in Groove Agent and it has reverb on it. How do I find the same sound without reverb/dry? So let me know if you have like which particular kit it is. But a lot of times the reverb is added as an effect. It's generally not, everything will be kind of sampled. Like most of the sounds will be dry. So let's take a look. So let's say if we come over, but if you could let me know what exact kit it is, that's always helpful, but I'll try loading one up here. To see if some of these are more reverb based. All right, let me set up the correct monitor mix. All right, so let's say this sound has reverb in it. So it could be just coming over, and if you go to the if you go to the amplifier section, we can see that aux 1 here, and we have aux 2. So aux 1 is the reverb. So if it is a beat agent kit, try looking. So now when I come over here, we could just have that sound dry. And then if we wanted to add the reverb, so when you come to the mixer, here you could see the aux, and then we can say, okay, here we have a reverb, a delay, and a reverb. So now when we come over to edit, and we go to the amplifier section, this is where we see the aux sends going, and this would be for each pad. So if I select this pad and I wanted to add reverb, generally reverb is going to be aux 1. So now we hear the reverb. Now we could turn the reverb off. So try that, and if it is a let's say like an acoustic agent kit, it could probably be very similar. The mixer may look a little different. So when you come over here to the agent mixer, you may notice that you'll have your different aux sends. So when we go to, again, our aux sends, we could say, okay, let's, I think we could actually, okay, so we'll go to our aux sends here. Let's add the reverb. All right, so now we go back to our agent mixer. We could add more reverb or have it be dry. So that's how you could probably take reverb out of the drum sounds. Okay. See, Troca says when Greg adds a delay, the singer becomes talented. It's an old production trick. All right, so we have Lawrence Koch checking in from Barn Door Recording in Rhode Island. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we have Channel Ripoff. I believe it was 808 King previously, if my memory serves correct, from northern Georgia. All right, so I think Jazz Dude shared maybe Best Green Jesus's video on using his mouse. All right, so we see from SE Tracks, Greg, I want to use a bus where all my vocals are routed to, from auto-tune, compressor, EQ, limiter, and much more. I don't want to put all the effects in every single track because my PC causes glitches. So generally, you could do that, for like the compressor, EQ, limiter. So, if you want to create one track that does that, so let's say I want to take, these guitar parts here, and I could route these to a group. So I'm going to say add track. Let's add a group channel to the selected. So now that we add a group channel, we can come over to this particular group channel and add our let's say our EQ. So we want to come over, say we want to add a frequency EQ. We want to add like the black valve compressor. Now I would shy away from doing auto-tune on the bus if you have multiple tracks going to it, because when it's if you have one vocal, let's say you have 3 vocals going to it, one of the vocals is a little sharp, one of them is a little flat, it's going to pitch correct all of them one direction. It's not going to be able to make the flat one to raise it up to pitch and the sharp one down to pitch. It's basically just going to take the pitch and globally do it. So if you have, but for your compression and EQ, that's not going to be as kind of as channel specific as the vocal. So each vocal may need different vocal processing. So if it's detecting if there are 3 notes going on in a harmony, one is flat, one is sharp, I don't think it's going to automatically, flatten the sharp note and raise the pitch of the flat note. It's going to give you kind of one basis for the tuning, which could make the other one sound bad. All right, so we see Mr. Nobody just says, "Hi Greg, is it possible to change the font size or scaling on Cubase 14 Mac OS on Mac OS?" So if you just change your resolution, I won't do it because it might mess up the stream, because it's expecting kind of a 1080p for the live stream. But if you just kind of go to your display setting here, so let's just say, okay, let's go to and then if you adjust your resolution there, so it's not going to do just the fonts, but that will increase the resolution or decrease the resolution depending on what resolution you choose. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely, who has to take off. All right, wishing everyone a great weekend. We have Marco Polix, says, "Greg, good to see you're doing fine. So thanks for checking in and joining the live stream today." All right, always great to see Matt Elston on. All right, let me just, my chat field jumped on me. All right. All right, so Babel asks, "Hey Greg, once I've soloed a bunch of tracks, is there a way to quickly unsolo all soloed tracks?" All right, so let's say I'm here and I've soloed like tracks up here and I'm down here and I unsoloed, I'm still hearing this. If you come up to the top here, there's a deactivate all solo states. So then all the solos will be cleared. So if you come, we have these tracks soloed, just come right here, and then you could deactivate all the solos. All right, so we see Daniel Bakinda says, "Problem sustained for Cubase 14. So let me know what exact problem that you're having with sustain. Is it a MIDI CC message or what's going on?" Matt Elston's received a pina colada from Michael Teams. Sounds like a great choice. All right, Tim Weinheimer is also suggesting you could use the magnifier tool in Windows to enlarge the screen. Tim K is just saying, when we had some discussion earlier about the Arturia, I think it's the 140 plate, says Arturia generally makes really solid plugins for audio curmudgeons. See, Jeff Sabelski says, tariffs compel me to sell my oboe reeds for $4,445, but for a limited time only for Germany. Home is Steinberg. They're free. That's very generous. That's true international diplomacy. All right, so we see from Choka, it says, if I'm preparing samples in Cubase to throw out at a lower Phi machine, shall I work with them in target bit depth and sample rate, or work high and convert at the end? So if your sampling machine isn't capable of effectively working with higher sample rates, I would probably work at the standard sample rate that your machine to end machine is going to be working on. So, I think most of the machines are going to be doing, unless it's kind of an older, like sampling hardware, most of them are going to be capable of 24-bit, 44.1, 48K. And I would think that would be probably sufficient for everything that you wanted to do. All right. Yeah. So I think kind of, unless it's like an 8-bit type of thing, I would work at probably the same resolution. All right. Our resident lurker has popped his head out of Best Korean Jesus. Thanks for being online today from San Diego. All right, Quellen asks, hello, Greg. Is it possible to use direct monitoring for mixing, or is it only useful for monitoring? I mean, direct routing. So direct routing can be, if you're not familiar with it, let's create a couple of groups here. All right, so I want to make, let's say we're doing like a parallel processing. And let's say, we're using 8 effect sends. It could easily happen on some projects. So I'm going to add a few group tracks here. Okay. All right, so let's say we have these 3 group tracks that we've added. Okay, so what we want to do now, let's say I wanted to do like parallel processing. So on this group track, I wanted to put like a really heavy duty compression on it. So let me just... And I want to kind of boost the high end frequencies on this as kind of just a shelf. Okay, so like when we're doing, so direct routing is going to allow us to do like a lot of parallel processing. So let's say we want to now go to our direct routing. So I'm going to go to my setup, and we could say, if it's, let me see if the hell is in here. Just direct routing summing mode on. All right, so I'm going to take all of my drum tracks. All right, so I'm going to just take my Q sends here. Let's activate the Q link. So I want to select all my drums. And let's create just a quick. So I want to send these to all to group 1. Or send them all to group 2. And let's also send them to group 3. So now as we play, I'll just kind of pop here. So now I don't have to set up aux sends. All of my tracks are going into the parallel group. So now all of my tracks here are being fed into this drum group. And now I could blend this in with the compression. So when we want to do like lots of parallel processing, I think it makes sense for the, to have the group tracks doing, because you may not need like varying levels, but you're just kind of sending it to different devices. So for like, if you're doing a lot of parallel processing, it's a great, easy way, and you don't have to worry about utilizing your effect sends. All right. You see David M. checking in from Liverpool. Thanks for joining. Always great to have you on. All right, so we see from Rashid Gooden, downloaded 60-day trial, great dog, but it's struggle trying to get used to something new. So yeah, I mean, if there's any like translation, like I can't figure this out, or it's called this in another program, I want to do this in Cubase, where is it? We're happy to kind of help. And there's a lot of resources here that are available on the Club Cubase live streams for you to use. We see that Artist Knows Love says it'll be worth it. All right, great to see Graham Witcher on. And you got Kahlua Mocha ice cream. Sounds like great flavor. I'll be in Hawaii in a week. Sounds good. All right. All right, so we have Soren in Sweden. Just checking out a little while. Great to see you on. All right, so we have Bob checking in from Ohio. Just curious what part of Ohio you're in. It's good for me to imagine where people live. All right, so Graham's mentioning, I must say, Greg, that the current Steinberg 30% discount offer on Cubase is fabulous. I took advantage of it and upgraded to Pro 14 for only £58. That's great. Make sure you get all the partner products as well. Great. Okay, reading through. All right, we'll see Bob just says he missed a sale by 1 week, so I'm not sure. The Cubase sale is still going on, but if it's Nuendo sale, that's over with. I see we see Bob got it a week early, but you can now get all your partner products as well. All right, so we see from IR says, hi Greg, I tried Arpache today since a long time, but the record button for recording the MIDI data to the track is gone. Yeah, it just kind of changed a little bit. So let's show you how to do it now. It's slightly different, but principles kind of similar. All right, so let's just get this project loaded up. All right, so let's say, all right, so we're going to go to our MIDI inserts. And let's go to, let's say, our Arpache. All right, so you notice that the record, it used to be a little record button. Now when you hover to the top, you'll see this white line. Move this white line down. And now everything above the white line is recorded. So when I come here to the synth bass part, we hit record. Take it off. So just make sure that this line, you'll see as you kind of hover, you can move that line up or down, but you could just move that one particular line, and then kind of that will allow, that's the above that line records, below that line is just processed in real time. So once again, just move that line. All right, so we see Cedric Hawkins. I'm in a session that's 60 beats per minute, and the bass player I'm working with recorded his part at 120 beats per minute, and the resulting file is 2 times as long as my session. How can I remedy this? So you could try to, like, if that recording, half time, you may get some artifacts with this, but we'll just set up a new project here. Okay, so I'll just set up quick instrument track here. It's the groove agent. Route this to group. Okay, so we have this to group. I'm going to add an audio track with its inputs. I'll just record some quick audio. And that's going to be coming, I guess didn't have to do that. We'll just come to the instrument. All right, so we're at 120 beats per minute. So we have an audio file that's at 120 beats per minute. So we want to go to the pool window, and you can do that by hitting Control or Command plus the letter P. And you want to make sure that it has a tempo stamp of 120 beats per minute. So now you could come over, try to place it into musical mode. And as we do this, and you can also select the event and put it into musical mode here. Let's change our project tempo to 60. And now. So now it's playing at half the speed versus what it was playing at. So you could try that. Now, it could be also that maybe they recorded it and their audio file was, and maybe their tempo was set wrong. So if you do that in the octave, sounds like it's in the wrong octave that you would expect, go into the pool window, and again, you can access that from the from the media menu. And you could also, like, if you do that and it seems like you place it in musical mode and it seems like it's the wrong octave, try changing the origin tempo here to 60 beats per minute as opposed to 120 and see if that fits. but you could stretch it. You may have some artifacts if it's doing it half as fast, but you could still do it. Okay. See, Peter from Montreal is feeling spoiled with his ice cream gift from Michael Teams. So we see Mr. Nobody. He says, I wish Cubase 14 had the same display scaling as on Windows. I don't want to change the overall display scaling. Yeah, it's kind of how the Mac OS works versus Windows. So, see, Peter is saying it's April 4th and he's still shoveling snow off his front lawn. So, it's a bummer. But mowing grass probably isn't much better. So. All right. So we see Benny checking in from Sweden. It says you have recorded a country song until now. All right. Great. All right, reading through comments. All right, so we see Bob is from Andover, Ohio. Thanks for letting me know. I used to always do Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, and my Ohio runs back in the day. Okay. Okay. All right. So we see from IR just says thank you, Greg. And that's about the arpeggios. All right. Wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. All right. Gareth is saying hello from Agartha. I think that's a Hot Mess reference. All right. All right, so a question from Tiago. Says, I recently had to import my profile, but Cubase did not import my plugin settings in Control Room. I also would like to export my Control Room settings for backup purposes. Is it possible? Thanks, Greg. So usually the Control Room settings are just saved as presets. So check to see. So when you come to the audio connections, and we come over here, when we save a preset, so let's say I wanted to load up a bunch of plugins here. So I have Supervision. Let's say I wanted to, for some reason, put an EQ. So on my control here, I could just say, okay, and I want to put compression on my monitoring path. So if I have all these different processes and I save it as a preset, so it'll come over to the audio connections. So check to see if your presets here from the VST connections have been, so I'm going to say let's save a preset. We'll call this April 4th. 2025. Okay, so now let's say I get rid of all of these plugins from my Control Room and I switch to a different preset. And these, so check to see if your preset, so maybe you didn't save it as a preset, or if you save it as a preset, we could come over. So let's say I just want to go to default for my preset here. Okay, so I have that, and now when I go to under, again, my studio menu to audio connections, I want to recall all of my plugins I had set up. We would just say, let's go to April 4th, 2025. And now that we load that up, all of the routings and all of the plugins will be preserved. So it might have carried over. Just make sure that you actually load. See if you see the control room preset there. And if it is there, just load it up. If not, you could just simply save the preset and copy it over. Like I believe that it is transferred over in the within the profile. If not, I could figure out exactly where it is. So give that a try, Tiago. All right. Gareth has an out of control room. All right. All right, so let's get to some of the questions that were mailed in. All right, so I had a question. How to use the pattern editor for VST instruments. Okay. So let me just come over. I'm going to add a VST instrument. So let's add a retro log here. Okay, so where we see the event type, we want to choose pattern event as opposed to MIDI part. So usually when we do drums, we want it to be a pattern event. And if we want to use like virtual instruments, we could also choose for that to be a pattern event. So now when we come over here, we can see that the pattern has automatically been added. And let's say I want this to be when we put a note in, we're going to load up a preset. Okay, so now I want to now just kind of add some additional notes. So let's say I'll just click on the plus sign. And we'll just add like 2 octaves. Okay, so we have C1 through C3. So let's go ahead and I'll right click. One of the cool things that we can do now is come over here and let's just double the length of the pattern. So we can say, okay, so let's say as we hit play, all right, so now and then if we wanted to kind of change the rhythmic, so then you can make kind of your own patterns, or if you wanted to randomize the patterns here. So you can use it for the pattern editor for VST instruments. It's not limited to just working with the drum machine. But now, so again, to do that, when we go to add a VST instrument, so we can right click, add instrument track, just choose for it to be a pattern event. All right, so we had a question. I want to know how I can select/edit a specific sound in Groove Agent Pad when playing, for example, D#2 in different velocity, or click in different locations of the pad to use different sounds. I want to know how I can edit each of these sounds. Okay, so let me just come over here, activate this project. Okay, so let's say I have multiple snares that are on this particular pad. So we have up to 32 different sample layers. Right there. And when we do this, we could choose to have these do to layer all these snares together. So 8 samples are playing, or we could have these do random. And as we do this, we could also just have this follow, so the MIDI follows on and off. So now as we play different notes, we could see which one of the 8 samples. So if we drag sounds onto a particular pad, so I'll just come over here, we can see that we can have this. So we have one sample. If I drag another sample onto the pad, we could see, and we see where we have like these 2. Now we could have, let's see if I go to, so we drag over new sounds, and we want this to layer these sounds together when we see one sound. So now I have 3 different sounds on this particular pad. Okay, so if we wanted to edit these individually, we select the particular sample, and at this point we could say, okay, I want to do like some typical sample editing. I want to take this and I want to do, fade in, I want to undo. So we could choose different editing tasks for each of the samples. So we could say, just for this one sample, if we wanted to adjust the envelope for, so now when we come over to do sample editing, we could say, okay, I want this to fade in as we start. So if I wanted to get rid of this, we could loop a selection. We can just come over here and, if we want to do range selection, so let's just delete, that portion of the sample if you wanted to. So now we could select the different, so some functions will be global for the pads, but now we could come over here and just have different sample editing. So I could have different fade ins, fade outs for multiple samples on the same pad. All right, so a question. I'm recording audio innuendo, however, there's a clear delay about a 16th note out. When I listen back to the audio direct monitoring on my interface, there is no latency. However, I am unsure whether it's something innuendo or the interface. So latency is going to come from 2 different areas. So if I was playing, let's say I had my Groove Agent, I'll just load up a traditional kit here. All right, so now when we come over and we play a particular sound, so we'll say, okay, we have this. So latency is coming from 2 places. One, it's going to be from the buffer on your audio interface. So when we come over, we could say, okay, we're going to have the buffer size here. So if I increase the buffer, the higher the latency. Now, if we have it set for direct monitoring, the signal is kind of going directly from the inputs to the outputs. Something else that could throw it off is plugins. So plugins can have their own amount of latency for processing. So like the vocal chain is like 16 different plugins in one plugin. So this plugin has a high amount of latency. I'm going to come over here, and now we could see that we could activate the latency. So just looking at this track now has 472 milliseconds of latency. So when I go to hit a pad, it's going to take 472 milliseconds because of the plugins that are being used in the project. When we play back the project, that's all compensated for, but when we're recording in, we're going to see this delay. So I'll press it in 3, 2, 1. So you can see that delay. Now, what you can do is a quick way to fix the high latency plugins is just to come over here, and you could bypass the plugins or just come right here in the bottom left hand corner. This is what this constrained delay compensation button does. So you can see that those plugins are now bypassed. So when I click, it's going to be, the latency is going to go away. So this will go through the entire project and take high latency plugins and disable them. So that you can minimize the latency issues with one mouse click. So give that a try. So it's probably going to be plugins that are causing the latency as well. All right, question. Hi, Greg. I have Groove Agent 5 on a dongle. When Groove Agent 6 comes out at some point, maybe 2025, will I be able to update? And if so, will I lose my license for Groove Agent 5 on the dongle? Thank you. So Groove Agent 5 is already migrated from the dongle to the Steinberg licensing. So what I would do is, if you look into your vouchers folder, go to the Steinberg website, click on My Steinberg, log in with your My Steinberg credentials. At that point, look in your vouchers folder, and then you could migrate from Groove Agent 5 on the e-licenser to the new Steinberg licensing. And then, when the next version of Groove Agent comes out, I'm not sure when it's coming out, at that point, you'll be able to just simply upgrade, and you don't have to worry about any of the licensing, because the licensing server, again, will be shutting off May 20th of this year. So about 5 weeks. So you want to make sure, it's best to do all of your migrations early before that time. So, but, Groove Agent 5 does work on the Steinberg licensing. All right, so a question. Rendering audio works as expected. Rendering MIDI does not. Why is there a difference in this process? Should there be? I had an instrument track with MIDI that I wanted to render. I tried everything I could think of, solo off, and a lot more, and its rendered result always ended up being just an empty audio event. What finally worked was muting all tracks except the track I wanted to render. I'm assuming this isn't the case. Best way to do this, though, right? If you have 100 plus tracks like I do, it'd be a lot easier, faster, just in a lot more sense to solo the tracks you want to render instead of muting 100 plus tracks. Even better would be to make the MIDI rendering process the same as the audio rendering process. So it is really, in essence, the same. So let's say if I just grab, a pattern out from this Groove Agent. Let me just select one that has a pattern. Sorry about that. right, so let's say all right, so I'll just take that pattern here. Let's drag that over. All right, so, it depends, again, it could be like what is selected. Sometimes I've seen this happen in some scenarios where, like, if it's record enabled, that could make a difference. So, but I'm going to just select the event. Let's come over here. Let's render in place. So we will now choose our render. I'll just choose my render settings. All right, so we'll do dry. I'll just do my channel settings, and we hit render. So we see that that's going to be muted, and that automatically works. But try to make sure that you don't have the MIDI track record enabled. I've seen that kind of create. Let's see if that changes the behavior. So we'll play this back here. Okay, so see, while that is record enabled, we will come over and we'll use the same render settings. So we'll just say, yeah. So, but it's really, works the same. But if you run into that, it could be, if you're soloing, that maybe if it's being routed to a group and that group isn't also soloed, that could cause it. But now as we listen to it here, we can just, so that would be the same. So it really is the same functionality. Okay, next question. I'm loving the new addition, but as always, there's room for improvement. Just an example, I have a vocal. This is with the audio segment detection. I want to use this new feature to raise only the I. It says I have a vocal that goes, I know. I want to use this new feature, but to raise only the I. Sometimes the detection isn't right, and then in this example, it seems like it's just one word. So I'll have to do it another way. It would be great to have some option of increasing, decreasing the detection range. So in the example, I could set the detection range on just the I and still use an otherwise excellent feature. Yeah, so it's sometimes, I've noticed that as well, that isn't necessarily a way. So when we're here with the range tool to alter the range that it's doing, but if you just kind of select with the range tool, you could just simply adjust manually as well. So if you want just that small part right there, you could just select it with the range tool and be able to adjust it like that. So, but this way it's kind of, okay, I want to take this one hit and be able to adjust accordingly. You could do that. But there's chances it may not catch every syllable depending on the phrasing. We go, I, da, da. It may not be able to distinguish if, depending on the musical rhythm. But you could always just use the range selection tool here. And, you could set up a macro where whatever you select with the range, you could then drop it down by 12 dB or just be able to adjust by specific dB values as well. All right, next question. Recently, Cubase is often failing to recognize my audio driver. I'm not sure, but it could be since the latest Cubase update. Anyway, these problems started around that time. What gives me little doubt is that I installed the latest update for my VSX headphones around that time as well. I always listen through these and always have my audio driver set as VSX system-wide, which is their own audio driver. I've done it like this for about 1.5 years now without any problems until recently. To describe the problem, I'm watching one of your Club Cubase live streams. At the same time I'm starting Cubase, I go back to watching the live stream, waiting for Cubase to start. Shortly after that, the audio from YouTube stops. I open Cubase and there's a pop-up window saying something about the audio driver can't be found, something similar. So it seems like I can no longer watch YouTube and have Cubase running at the same time. To get sound from Cubase, I have to change the audio driver in Windows, so I can't use it system-wide. So, make sure that, when you go here, sometimes check to see that the audio, when you go to, the studio menu to the studio setup, that we come over and, when you select the audio system, that release ASIO driver when application in background is turned on. So I'm not sure if it's the VSX. I think that's the Slate headphones. I'm not sure if they're working as an audio interface as well. I guess you're using it as an audio interface in addition to maybe, I'm not sure if it's connected directly into the Audient or if it's functioning as another audio interface. But try just that setting again to make sure, because generally in your scenario that would allow you to kind of toggle back and forth. So again, studio menu to studio setup to the audio system to release driver when application is in background. All right. And another comment says, I'm also using VSX and Cubase at the same time, so I can understand if there's a conflict, but this is a new problem, so it's been working great before. So I'm not sure if you're using the VSX as an audio interface. Generally, there's one audio interface that's available at a time for clocking. Or if it's connected into your Audient interface. Okay, next question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to import or export chords with MIDI tracks when I do chord data is not apparent? So if we have like a chord track, so let's look at... All right, so let's say we have our chord track here. If it's a standard MIDI file, standard MIDI files don't have a way of doing chords. Some sequencers can add, I think it's called like a system extension, or can add additional metadata in, but it's not part of the standard MIDI file. So a standard MIDI file itself doesn't contain any chord information. There's a couple of things that you could do. So let's say if I wanted to, you could kind of put it in as text, which often can be used as lyrics. So let's say we add a MIDI track here, and I want to import some data. Let's go to the list editor. So I'm going to select the event. Let's go to MIDI to open the list editor, and we could choose what MIDI information we want. So let's say if we want to put in text, we can now, as we click here, we could just enter in text at specific regions. So say if we just come over to or if we wanted to put in standard MIDI file information. So let's say I put in something for standard MIDI file. Here we could change. So we could put in the sequence number, text, copyright information, track name, instrument, lyric, marker, cue point, or standard MIDI file events. But within the MIDI file specification itself, there is no provision for chords. I think Yamaha, for their Arranger keyboards, they can put an extension that could be read in Cubase, but since it's not, in different companies have that ability to kind of put extension of metadata that's proprietary, kind of like a proprietary metadata for workstations that's carried over in a standard MIDI file. But Cubase isn't going to necessarily allow you to enter in proprietary information for 100 different arranger workstation keyboards, because it's not really part of the standard MIDI file specification. Okay, so we have a question. In the new drum track, is there a way to check the phase between drum layers and reverse the polarity if needed? All right, so let's say if I wanted to let's come over to the drum machine. So I don't think that there is. I think what a lot of people would do is check the polarity before dropping it in. But let me just jump here to some one-shots. So let's add a drum track. So I don't think that there's a phase reverse like we would get inside a Hallion. So let's say and let me just see if we go to I don't think that there's a way I think that you would have to kind of drop the samples in, but I don't think that there's a kind of a phase check within the drum machine. But if you're on the actual, if you drop them into the project, you could check phase there and then correct it, bounce the selection and drop it into the drum machine. So sorry about that. Okay. Answer that. All right, and then we had a question, how to import Cubasis projects into Cubase. So there is a little project downloader. So let's say if we come over here, we'll say Cubasis project import. All right, so if you get this little utility and download this, you could, Cubasis will also do DAW project, which you could get in and out of Cubase. But if you download this importer directly here, now what you could do is, we'll just say, when you go to File, you go to Import, and we'll see Cubasis project. But you have to install that little utility, and then you could just directly import the Cubasis project right there. All right, let me jump back to live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. Again, if you want to send questions in advance, send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right, Gareth is saying Retrolog is the most underrated synth in the history of stuff. Yes, it's a great instrument. All right, wonderful to see Dwight Cunningham checking in from the Bahamas. Sounds like a great place to be this time of year. Always envious that you get to live in the Bahamas. All right, Gareth is going to steal that riff. All right. All All right, so you see from David M. in Liverpool, just says, "Hi Greg, I downloaded some of the freebies. UA stuff seemed to trigger the dreaded McAfee Norton pop-up loops. As soon as I disabled UA notifications, it stopped. Has anyone else had this?" So I haven't run into that. I know, I think that they also utilize iLock, so it might be iLock that could be triggering it as well. But let me know if anyone else has run into it. All right, Stephen Kane asks, "Hi there, happy Friday. Is there an easy way to copy and paste and insert an entire section of a song to another location in a song without using the arranger track?" Okay, so let me just open up a different project here. Okay, so let's say I want to take all right, so let's say I want to find maybe just like this part, and I want to like insert it and knock everything else over. So just listen to this part here. All right, so let's say I want to take those 8 bars here. So I'm going to grab the arranger track. And then I'm just going to hold down like Shift plus the Alt key here, or Alt or Option. So I'm going to take those 8 bars, and I think I'm just going to put this into shuffle mode. So let's say I want to copy. So Command or Control C. And let's say I go to measure 49. I think if we... So let's say I'm just going to drag this over and hold down my Alt or Option key. All right, I think there's a way. So let's say, let me just find, so using the shuffle mode here. All right, so if I duplicate that was a shuffle mode, let me just, all right, so let's say I want to take these 8 bars and paste them there. So I'm going to Alt or Option, we'll take this time, I'm going to copy. So let's do Command, Control C. Let's move these 8 bars over here. Let's go to my edit. All right, didn't like that. Let me just reopen. All right, I'll try this one more time. So let's, all right, so I think if we, let's say if we duplicate. All right, so that will. All right, so I'm going to copy this. Let's move this over. And I want to, it's not liking that. All right, I'll try it on a different project. But you should be able to just take a range. I'll try it with a different project here. Okay, so I thought that we could come over here and say if we put shuffle, let's see if this misbehaves, and duplicate. All right, so that overrides it. But let's say if I copy this range, so let's copy that. We come over, we'll set this to grid, and let's get to range. And then you could do the insert silence, which moves everything over, and then paste like that. So even if that was multiple tracks, but I think that there's some way. We try with shuffle on. Let me just take like this section of audio, hold down my Alt Option key. That'll replace it. So yeah, so try, and I'll see if I can have a better workflow for this, but let's try copying this. You can move this range over to here. Go to Edit, to Range, Insert Silence. Sorry, it's going to be where the range is set to. All right, so I'm going to select this range, copy, move this range here. So we could select that range. We'll insert silence. And then hit 1 and then paste. And so you could do that globally as well based on the range selections. But I want to say that there's some way of using shuffle mode for this. So I'll have to look it up. I'll probably have a better answer on Tuesday if you want to email me. Sorry about that. All right, seeing discussion of McAfee pop-ups. So. All right. seeing discussion of ad blockers and various browsers. Okay. All right, so I see from Do Majeur 7 says any update on plugins. So let me know like which plugins. If there's any particular plugins that you have a question on. Okay. All right, so we see from Ricky Tayraj, it says, easy way to add strum to a stack block chord for large, even MIDI file. Let me just, easy way for a large, even MIDI file as a way. All right, so if we have like chords that are, one of the things that I like to do is just kind of, let's add a MIDI track here. So if we have okay, so let's say we have like our MIDI files here. I'll just quantize these all so that they're I think I actually have something set up. Let me just. Okay, so let's say we have quick guitar part, like so. So I have this going through like a MIDI arpeggiator. So let me just turn that off. All right, so let's say we have our chords laid out for us here. All right, so one of the tools you could use is this little trim tool. Hold down the Alt or Option key, and then you could just kind of take the beginning of the notes, and you could just kind of do various kind of strum patterns here. So we could just say, okay, let's make that. So now as we listen to it, so that's kind of an easy way of just kind of, so again, use the trim tool and just simply hold down the Alt or Option key. Then you can kind of drag and see strums and create strums that way. All right, always wonderful to see Michael Pierce on from Grand Chapel Studios in England. Gareth is calling King Michael of Piercitania and is a soup king, the Baron of Broth. All right, so we see another combination. So it says Ricky Terra just says I meant like 32 bar long chords is an easy way to add strum. So, you know, what you could do, so let's say if you don't want to do that manually, I'll just come here, go to like the MIDI inserts, and if you want to, there's like some different guitar strumming patterns there. So let's come over to the MIDI inserts here. So while it plays, you could actually kind of do one and load it as different. So let me just repeat this part here. So check out some of the and sometimes there's also, like, depending on the instrument, if you use like the there's some good strumming like inside of like Howling and Sonic as well. So if we come over here to let's go to edit, and we'll say the program layer, and we can come over to the flex phraser. I say there's some even kind of like the chord. So if you kind of play through some of the built-in arpeggiators here. So you could experiment with some of those if you're using like a Howling and Sonic sound. Then you could use those the flex phraser as well, which is a lot of great options. All right. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to automatically route different audio channels to different input buses in order, for example, audio 1 to input 1, audio 2 to input 2, etc., with one click? All right, so let's say we'll do just new project here. Okay, let's go to my inputs. So let's go to my audio connections. Now let's say my inputs. Let's say I'll just start off with 2 stereo here, and I want to add, let's say I have 8 mono inputs here. I'll make these mono. Okay, now I have 8 audio tracks that I'll add. All right, so we want to kind of ripple the inputs. So I'm going to come over here, hold down the Shift key, and I'll select mono in 1 for the selection here. So hold down Shift plus click mono in 1. And now when we look, if I did it right, Should be mono in. We'll go down to the next track. Let me just check it one more time. Oh, yes, I think it's shift. Might be just, let me just check, because those are the ones that have routings on it. So it might be different because I don't have any. Yeah, these are all kind of going to the same. So try just selecting all the tracks, hold down the shift key and change the first one since they're all kind of seeing the same inputs. Then it should automatically kind of ripple the inputs for you. All right. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Yuma, Arizona on, formerly of North Carolina. Hope your studio construction is going well for you, Brian. All right, and Brian's saying his filings I have to make today for his new house. All right, reading through comments. All right, Ricky Tara asks, is there a way to change color, track, and events simultaneously? All right, so let's say I record audio on all these tracks. Okay, so right now, if I haven't, it could depend. If I specifically have colored an event, the event will assume the track color. So if I come over here, I'm going to select all these tracks, hold down to shift, select the top and the bottom track within the range. I go to my colors. Now I could change all the tracks and all of their colors. Now, if I had kind of overwritten the coloring, say on this track, I want this to be red and everything else to be green. So if I've specifically colored an event, the colors won't, if I change the track colors, parts of the track that were specifically colored won't change. But now I could change my different colors, and the events, unless they've specifically been colored intentionally, will follow the track colors, but those that have been will maintain their track colors. So select all of the tracks. You'll see the little color palette right here. So it looks like a little painter easel, and then you can just change accordingly right there. Okay, Alfred Pogo asks, what would you recommend to back up my projects which are on a secondary drive? So if you have, if you have all the projects where the files are good to go and are on a secondary drive, that's great. If you wanted to put on a USB drive or put it onto like a cloud-based drive for easy access, if you have a cloud-based service that you like using, you could just simply come over here with a particular project and say, okay, I want to go to my file menu, and you'll see backup project. I haven't named the project here, but let me just go to a different project. So I can back it up because I didn't name it. Let me just, so say if I'm here, And then, people often back it up to like a portable hard drive. It used to be CDs and DVDs. It's not as pragmatic anymore, but we would just say, okay, we want to come over here and back up project. And then you could choose a different source, or if you wanted to back it up to like a cloud-based service, like at Yamaha we have Ignite, and we could just use that as a cloud-based collaboration. So. You see Michael Pierce is reheating some watercress and Savoy cabbage soup at the moment with sherry vinegar for the win. All right, Ricky asks, how do you do pitch automation like in Ableton on a loop or sample? So if you wanted to, let's come over here. So let's say we have a drum loop going on. So let's say we play this. All right, so some people will just come here. Let's get to your audio to direct offline. We can say to direct offline processing. So we'll say processes, and we could do pitch shift. So let's say, okay, I want to grab an envelope. Let's say I want to set my range of semitones. I can say, okay, let's start here, and we want to end here. So now when we play back the project, and if you want to do time correction or not, you can. So now we could change the pitch here. Another method that some people use is just to drop it into the sampler track. So we can now come over here. Let's get to sampler content. I could drag that sample in. We can set our pitch bend range here. So let's say I want my pitch bend range to be an octave. And now I could just take that sampler track. Let's see where it's at. And now if we then you could just do kind of pitch bend and just use your pitch bend wheel and do automated pitch like that. All right. So let me know. I've never used Ableton, so. All right. See, John Koskinen must run to his accountant. It will be wild. Well, it's fun tax season here in the U.S. All right. All right. See, I think maybe we're at the end of questions. We'll see if there's any other questions that sneak in. Just read through the last few discussions here. All right, we'll see if there's any other questions that sneak in. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. If you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll be back on Tuesday. Again, next Friday, a week from today, I'll be on vacation, and I'll be returning the following Saturday. And then the week after, I'll be out in California for meetings. So I'll see, depending on the meeting schedule, if I'm able to do a live stream from the office while I'm out there. If not, we may be back on the 28th. Sorry for such a long time. All right, so we see that the automatic routing by holding the shift key worked for you. Is that great? All right, see Michael Pierce says, thank you, Greg. All right, Gareth says, bust undo. And Michael Teams give me 4 trophies. All right, let's see if there's any other questions. Nice comments from Tim K to Jazz Dude. All right, give it another like 20 or 30 seconds. All right, so we see from Ricky Terra says dragging and dropping sample in between tracks, drop samples at random places, bug, or is there a correct way to drag and drop? All right. All right, so let's say if I have an audio file here, so if we're going from MediaBay, so let's say we come over and let's just drag. All right, so if I want to put it, all right, so it says drops at random locations. So let's say I want to put it between these 2 tracks. It'll place it at the cursor position, I think. So let's say, so if you're dragging it, so if you move to the cursor position and I drag it between 2 tracks, it's going to insert it at the cursor position. So let me know if that makes sense. So it doesn't, it's random. I don't think it's random. And if you wanted to drag it onto an existing track, you can just drag and drop to an existing track anywhere you want. But if you're doing it between tracks where it adds new track, it'll place the start of the sample at the playhead cursor. All right. Yeah, so I saw the email for the weed transfers, Gareth. Thanks for sending them. Okay. All right, so I think we are wrapped up for the day. Thanks for everyone for all the great questions. All right, Michael Pierce says, revelation today, no more creating tracks for sample drags. See, it's always great to learn other tricks from other people's questions. Right, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for being on the live stream today. Appreciate it. And we'll be back on Tuesday. And you can always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And if you have, and look forward to seeing everyone, please stay safe and healthy. And we'll see you back on Tuesday. Goodbye.